Hello everyone, this is Michael from TOAMagic.com. Today we're going to be talking about the rares that have already been spoiled from core set 2021. In particular, we're going to be focusing on the ones that have been reprinted in this set. First off, we have to talk about Azusa. Now, Azusa is a 3-mana 1/2 that lets you play 2 additional lands every turn. This card is very powerful. For context, this was originally printed in Champions of Kamigawa. It was later printed in Masters 25, and between those two printings, it had a price of as high as about $50 before the reprint, and it came down to about $25 or so after the reprint. Now, the card isn't as good in Modern as it used to be, because of the combo deck with Amulet of Vigor. However, you can tell that a card like this is clearly very, very strong. Let's take a look at some of the things that have been going on in past Standard. Historically, we've had Field of the Dead in this format, where we saw decks with Arboreal Grazer and a bunch of Guild Gates ramping into some powerful top end with Hydroid Crassus. In this case, we would have had Agent of Treachery. Obviously, that's now banned. But we have a bunch of decks that play 26 to 31, 32 lands, a very, very high land count in this format, which means that the likelihood that casting Azusa on 3 is going to allow you to untap on turn 4 with 6 mana is much more likely than it's ever been before. There's a lot of cool things you can do with that mana. We saw that we have a new 5-mana 6/6 that's pretty crazy in green. We already have Nissa in the format. We have Hydroid Crassus. There's a lot of ways that decks are going to be able to abuse having extra lands from Azusa. So I think $11.50 where this card is right now just isn't going to end up being the right price. I would expect this card to end up somewhere in the $15 range. This card is probably going to be a 4 of in some decks in Standard, certainly not every deck. And it is only a rare, but again, it's a core set rare, and core set rares have the potential to really break out in a way that other rares simply don't. The best cards from a core set simply don't have the supply that other cards do in general. So if there becomes a ramp deck at some point in the Standard format, Azusa is absolutely going to be a part of it, and you're better off holding on to Azusa now rather than trying to sell it, because the upside is just so high with how much demand Azusa is going to have. Containment Priest was originally printed in Chimera 2014, as well as Ultimate Masters, and has a reprint in Amonkhet Invocations. It's a 2-mana 2/2 flash creature that says if a non-token creature would enter the battlefield and wasn't cast from your hand, instead nothing happens, essentially. So it's a generic Hate Bear, but it's a sideboard card. This version is pre-selling at $2.50. It's about the same as the C14 and Ultimate Masters ones, but in the historical context, when this card was only in Chimera 2014 and only legal in Legacy and Vintage, it was a solid $20 bill, very hard to buy, and it just was not an unaffordable card. So where does that leave us for its potential in Standard and Pioneer and in Modern, where it's now appearing for the first time? Well, this card largely has a ton of potential, and nobody's trying to figure out where they want to play it right now because it's inherently an answer. Nobody's buying cards to their sideboard right now. Everybody's focused on the cool splashy things they can do and not worry about trying to stop other people's cool splashy things. If you look at M21, we have a number of cards that focus on bringing things back from the graveyard. There's the blue-black card that's 2 blue-black tap, sacrifice, return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's definitely possible that there is a reanimator strategy that is going to matter at some point over the next year. Remember, we have a year for these cards to develop in Standard. It would not surprise me if this card ended up at $4 or $5, because again, there's not a ton of supply out there. It wasn't printed in sets that have massive print runs, and it has such a high power level that this card's always going to see play. It's very hard to create a better Containment Priest. So I have a lot of hope in this card. We're not going to be pre-selling at $2.50. We're going to be shooting for a target of around $4 and possibly even a little higher, depending on how early pre-sales go on it. Next up, we have the Alternate Art Cultivate. This is a gorgeous card. very exciting to play with, but the price tag just doesn't line up. The current price tag on this card is $20, and this card's been printed a bunch already. Non-foil generic versions are about $2, and there's an F&M foil that's fairly nice as well, and the F&M one is selling for around $6 or $8, which leads me to believe that this card is likely going to be in that $10, $12, $15 range long term. So we're going to be pre-selling this one at $17.99, definitely under the market. Now we do have to be a little bit careful. WotC doesn't really tell us how print runs work. This is an alternate art, and we kind of know how alternate arts work in general, but the card is an uncommon in the regular set. It's a rare here. We're going to be treating it for pre-sale purposes as if it is a rare, and we'll have the same number of those as some of the other alternate art rares. If we end up getting more in our packs, we'll be a little surprised and disappointed because it's taking the place of other ones, but there's nothing that leads us to believe that there's going to be more Cultivates than other cards right now. Next up we have Fabled Passage. Fabled Passage was last printed in the Throne of Eldraine. That version is $8.70. This version is $8.70. This is pretty straightforward of let's just sell through this card. That said, it's a really exciting card to see in Standard. It, from a design perspective, says that 4 mana is going to be the critical number, that decks should basically have perfect mana by turn 4, and this combined with the temples gives a very slow mid-range oriented format which feels very fair. It's a good power level. It allows people to develop their game plans. This is a good omen from the design of Magic, and we look forward to seeing more cards in this vein. Heroic Intervention is a super exciting card from the set. Heroic Intervention is a $20 bill and has always been, basically, except until the recent reprint where the card was in the Planeswalker packs that you get from playing events at your LGS, and that really halted the sale of this card. This card has a really big availability problem, much more than anything else. We saw sales of this card decline significantly once the promo pack version started coming out, because it meant that somebody who needed this could trade and get it from the local game store. The card is now selling at $7 on pre-order. There's 70 copies available at $7. There's more copies available at $9, which means there's not really a consensus among stores for where this card should end up. We're not really sure where it's going to end up either, but the type of card this is, the power level of this card, we're going to be playing wait and see. We're going to see if that stock at $7 dips at all, or if people just aren't buying this on pre-sale. This is definitely something to be looking at long term. If this card gets down to that $3 or $4 retail range, it's definitely worth buying some, because the long-term potential of a card that was selling for $20 is very high right now. Solemn Simulacrum has been reprinted a lot. Originally printed in Mirrodin section, Invitational card. It's been reprinted in about 6 different Commander decks and was just in Mystery as well as Commander 2020, both which came out in the past 6 months. Supply is flooded right now. There are way too many copies of this card. If you're a Commander player, you shouldn't buy one of these. You should be buying like 6 of them, because you're probably not going to be able to buy this card cheaply in the future. The lowest pre-order listings right now are at $2.50, and we're calling that pretty close to a buy. This card historically has always been worth between $4 and about $8 after the Elves Inventor printing. We're expecting to be able to sell this card for about $5 long term, which means that if this card hits $2 from any of the other vendors pre-ordering it, we will be buying it. The last reprint in C20 to talk about are the Temple Cycle. These can all be talked about together. They're all pre-selling at about $1.80. We're kind of going with the flow on that. We're going to sell them off. It's a little disappointing that they're not as exciting of a land cycle as some of the others in order to drive sales. That said, it's a very convenient thing to have in formats. I think WotC's realized that players run more lands when they have temples in their deck, because the scry effect is pretty valuable, and being able to sequence your lands between temples and untapped lands adds a little bit of a challenge to formats overall. We're going to be selling these at $1.69. This means that if somebody buys 3, they hit the $5 shipping threshold. We're more likely to get someone's order from a card optimizer because of hitting that threshold nicely. So that's where our price is going to be. All of them are basically in that range. Over time, we're probably going to see some fluctuations as some of the better ones hit $3 or $4 at some point in the standard cycle, but it's a little bit hard to time that and we're going to be able to buy these fairly easily for 50 cents across the board with a lot of supply. We can look at our M20 sales, and we're, I'm sure, well over 100 copies of every one of these temples that have been bought and sold in the past year. All right, I want to thank everyone for watching. Go ahead and give me feedback you like down in the comments. Give the video a like. Talk to me on Twitter at TOAMichael, or just buy some of these cards at TOAMagic.com. Links for all of that is down in the description. Timestamps for all the cards are down there as well. So, take care.